Okay, so we're going to look at the last two pieces from classical Greece, and then there are three in the Hellenistic period. We talked about the Parthenon and all the buildings on the Acropolis in the last lecture. So the first image that we're going to look at is the grave stele of Hegeso, and it's from 400 BCE. We're still looking at the classical period, and this is just basically a tombstone. It's a grave marker. And we've looked at some steles in the past. The previous periods. So this one in particular is interesting because it's just basically a genre scene of Hegeso and her servant, and they're looking in a jewelry box. The servant is handing Hegeso and handing her the jewelry box, and there would have been a piece of jewelry in her hand here. I don't know if there really would have been a piece of jewelry. I don't believe so. It may have been painted. So there's one way that we know that this is for Hegeso, and I believe there's an inscription up here. And I think it's important to note that, like, the boxing or the border of the grave steles, the columns with the pediment and the acatiri sculpture, so very reminiscent of Athens. And I think it's also important to note that this is a relief sculpture. Hegeso is clearly in hierarchical scale. If we think back to like the Narmer palette, Hammurabi's code, the standard of all of the people that were most important in those pieces of artwork were a lot larger, even sitting down. So, we've still got this concept of this hierarchy. And in this case, it's not hierarchy because of a ruler. It's a hierarchy because of their economic status. So we're progressing, but I'm not sure if we're really progressing. She's sitting on this elaborate chair. There's an elaborate footstool here. We have the concept of the wet drapery happening. This is a high relief and low relief sculpture. So, and the last image that you need to know for the classical period is the Niobid crater, and the long title is Artemis and Apollo slaying the children of Niobe, but I'm good with the Niobid crater. It was painted by the Niobid painter. He was a well-known painter. I think he painted wall paintings as well, and the crater is a type of bowl that they would have had. And there's several different types of bowls from the Greeks, and the crater is the one that they would have mixed their wine with water. Their wine would have been extremely strong, so they would have had to have mixed it with water before they could drink it. It's like kind of like a large punch bowl. So the story that's happening on the crater is basically a horrific scene of it's about a woman named Niobe, and apparently she bragged publicly that her children were much smarter and much more beautiful than the goddess Leto's children. And according to myth, Artemis and Apollo killed all 14 children in revenge for their mother. So there were 7 daughters and 7 sons. They were all murdered, and you can basically see the act of the murdering all the way around the punch bowl. This is red figure painting. So red figure painting basically allows for a tremendous amount of detail, and it's where they would have glazed the entire thing black and then gone in and etched, scraped off the paint to expose the terracotta color. So you have Artemis right here. And then we have Apollo here, and you can see like there's movement. Their bodies are clearly, the painting isn't as far along as their sculpture is. There's no ground line. There's no sense of varying planes, so you don't have like a middle ground, a foreground, and a background. I think it's interesting because on this side there's Hercules. There's no sense of movement to these figures at all. I mean, because of the positions that they're in, that we get that idea of movement. And I think this is a good example of like seeing the archaic becoming classical, and this also depicts like the influence of Greek wall painting. It didn't survive; none of the Greek wall paintings survived, and there's an attempt to accomplish some depth in the painting. So you can kind of think this is like a painting of a sculpture. And the last three images that we're going to look at are from the Hellenistic period. It's the last period in like the Greek Empire before it falls. And the Hellenistic period is truly marked by the death of Alexander the Great in 323. And it really lasted for almost 3 centuries until we had the double suicide of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. And this is a period of intense realism and emotion. So we go from this period where the classical is just idealized and it's all about the kalos and how perfect we can embody ourselves physically, mentally. And the Hellenistic period is going to show we're still going to have this idealistic body, but it's going to be much more emotive. So you will see figures have actual like expression to their face as opposed to what it was in the classical period. So the Hellenistic age, it really centers of Greek successor kingdoms. So like you're gonna see a shift from as far as like geography goes. Like Athens is not going to be so much the central area, and I believe that it's because Alexander's the Great kingdom was so wide expanded that it had to move a lot. New ideas of a new king, citizenship. So like I think they're starting to get away from democracy so much, and of course then we'll go into the Roman Empire where they pretend like they're democratic, but they're really not. So this is the first image that is on the AP slides from the Hellenistic period, and it's the altar of Zeus from Pergamon, Turkey. And I think it's important that you note that the location is Turkey. So this would have been situated on an Acropolis in Pergamon, and it's probably the most famous Hellenistic piece. It was this huge complex on this Acropolis city, which currently is in ruins, and the entire temple has been relocated to Berlin. And the kingdom of Pergamon was created in the 3rd century, and with the breakup of Alexander the Great's empire after he dies, this Pergamon regains some strength. So this frieze, this is such a small picture and it just does not do it justice, but this frieze that runs across here to give you some sense of how large this actually is actually 400 feet long. And I think it's like 7 feet and 6 inches tall. So, you know, if you would stand up against just the frieze part itself, you probably only come up to about here. It's really, really large. The whole frieze is showing gigantomachy, so the battle between the Greeks and the Amazons and the centaurs, and it's showing basically the victories. So you have this concept of gigantomachy, but we also have the Pergamons against the Gauls too. So a lot of, the battle scene, victorious, winning, all powerful, and I'm sure that has to do with the scale as well. So here's like a plan view of what the Acropolis at Pergamon would have looked like. There would have been a series of temples and several theaters. And here's just like an up-close image of one of the parts of the frieze, and like I said, it's 7 foot 6 inches tall, and it's Athena here in the middle, and she's grabbing the hair of a giant, and Nike, who is right here, flies in from the side to crown her victorious and powerful, like all powerful. And I think this is where you're going to note the emotion. I think we were more empathetic to the losers, and we really show the emotion in this period and the movement, and it almost looks like you can feel her grabbing him, and you see his arm coming up here. Wet drapery. Obviously, they're very, very skilled craftsmen. They haven't lost that, but we're moving forward. And the second image from the Hellenistic period, 190 BCE, is the Winged Victory. This is in the Louvre. It was out of a harbor. She would have been perched on top of a ship, and they say that her arm would have been holding a crown. And clearly the clothing is extremely revealing, and it's going to become more revealing in this period. The Venus of Milo is actually going to be bare-breasted, which we've never seen before in with the Greeks. The wind-blown detail and almost this sense of movement is very apparent in this sculpture. It gives the idea of like she's almost going to take flight. It's very empowering. I think if you're familiar with Liberty Leading the People from the French Revolution painting by Delacroix, that's where this concept comes from, like this movement and thrusting. And it's just art in the state of glory. And I think that we get a lot of our monuments from this. And the final image from Greece is the seated boxer, and this is actually located in Rome. It's from 100 BCE, and it's actually one of the surviving bronze cast. And we have this magnificent athlete. So you've got this concept of return to the ideal from the classical period, but it's much different than it would have been in the classical period. He's battered and bruised, and there's actually blood casted in the bronze. He's all beat up here. And he's shown as an older man, and he's like weathered. His ears are cauliflowered from boxing. And there's a possibility that he could have been looking up the man who beat him. So a lot different than the classical period, even though we can tell that it's Greek because the body is so remarkably idealized. But these new concepts of emotion and showing the vast differences between young and old, and in classical we were just showing the youthful male and the youthful female.